Welcome back to the One Shot Show, where GMs go to level up. We'll keep this short and sweet. That's my favorite Sabrina Carpenter album. It's the only Sabrina Carpenter album I know of. I know she's released others, and I just haven't listened to them.
This is now a Sabrina Carpenter-themed podcast.
Exactly, and what that really was is a terrible way to begin a podcast episode, and 4 episodes in, we are going to talk at long last about how to start your campaigns. Before we do that, in the spirit of starting this in a terrible way, I'm Matt.
And my name is Mock.
How do you start your campaigns?
Well, the way that I like to start my campaigns, and we're not talking about a session 0 or character building or any of that baseline infrastructure you have to do before you begin the adventure. We're talking about the very beginning of your very first adventure. This is setting the scene, introducing the characters to each other, even when the players may already be very good friends.
Yeah.
There is a specific trick that I love to use.
Hit me.
When I am doing one-shots for different people. And I will have each player walk into the room one at a time, describe their character, and tell me, the GM, why they are well-known already. What is something that they are already famous for? And then the next person walks into the room and I say, welcome, whatever your name is. You recognize the person who's already here because they're famous for this, but you're more famous than that. Tell me why. And then what I'm doing is I'm setting a tone of fun and improvisation and a little bit of like one-upmanship. And as every player walks into the room, they will be forced to invent an even crazier and crazier and crazier backstory for this one shot. And that successfully makes sure that everybody remembers who everybody is. It sets the tone of my games, which are often very silly, very improv heavy, and very much rewarding the craziness and the creativity. And that bundles everything that I like about running one-shots up into a neat little bundle. But this does not work for more serious campaigns. In fact, if only we had someone here who's a fan of more serious campaigns.
If only we
who
knew a
might
guy.
be able to give advice on how you might start a more
we knew a
grounded
guy.
Earth campaign. Matt, do you know anybody who might have advice like that?
I really got to rack my brains on this one.
Do you think you could fill in for them?
I'll do my best. I'll do my
Okay.
best. And I actually think, funny enough, you touch on the difficulty in this with long-form campaigns is when you're doing it for a one-shot, when you're doing it, for a bit of a gas, it's a one and done. It doesn't need to be super cohesive.
Yep.
It's not like there's going to be consequences from their actions. It's all going to be wrapped up and bundled away in, a 3 to 4 hour session, almost like, serialized episodes of TV shows,
Yeah.
right? When you're doing something long form, that introduction has to do a couple of things for you, and it's very load-bearing. It has to introduce the characters, first and foremost. You will have probably, as you alluded to at the start, already have done a lot of work with them. Who are you? What's the character? What's the build? What's the backstory? Here's the world. How do you fit in? Hey, I'm starting the campaign here. Everyone's kind of heading roughly in this direction. Why are you there? Why are you going in that direction, etc., right? Effectively, what I'm doing functionally in that first episode is I am giving everyone a reason to be in one place just so that we can deal with that conceit of everybody having to be a party of people who know each other. And then I'm also going to carry the load of making the first session and probably the first few sessions, often the first story arc of my campaigns, which may be 5 to 10 sessions, is all about just having a relatively straightforward sequence of events that gives the characters plenty of time to get to know one another, to really meld as a party, and also to get familiar with the world itself and how things are going to proceed.
Okay, so are you a fan of having all of these imaginary characters meet each other for the first time at the beginning of your story? Or do you lean more towards saying to your players, your characters will already know each other. I want to skip this kind of awkward introductory part and push us directly into an adventure.
Bit of column A, bit of column B. I have the benefit.
Spicy.
I have the benefit of I tend to run games for a group of relatively stable people that I've run for a number of years. Even when I'm starting a fresh game, I'm usually starting it with at least 3 players that I've run with before. I'll give a great example of this. Second campaign I ran was fresh off the back of campaign number 1. This was 80 years time skipped in the future. Everyone's coming in with new characters. And all these players already knew each other. Two of them decided they wanted to be brothers, right? So, cool, great. You already know each other. You've already got that. A couple of players had those little bits and pieces. I'll give a particular example. This is from my most recent campaign that I started. I go, you're all going to be in this border fort. You're all sort of heading toward the Outlands. Here's what those are like. Here's why you might be there. And then players kind of came to me with the ideas for characters, and I would kind of go, okay, maybe it makes sense that you're there because of this reason. Maybe you're after this thing. You're interested in these sorts of things. And some of them would already come with a pretty fleshed out idea. Here's what I ended up with in session 1. I had a Kobold Ranger. He had already been at the fort for a while. He got caught out and injured in a blizzard. He had, been nursed back to health and had been helping with the Rangers to hunt for a bit of meat. He's already been there for a week, right? Intro, done. A couple of them meet each other on the road while they're out to this place. They've got a little bit between them, not heaps, but a little bit. One of them is an automaton that has stumbled out of the snow in the other direction. He's come from the Outlands. He has no memory, right? These are all very basic things, but the net effect is magically in the course of 24 hours, all of these people have arrived at this one location, and then something happens.
You have touched on something which might be the best piece of Game Master advice we will ever give out on the show. And that is asking your players for what they want. Here is a top tip. Make your players do the work.
Yep.
If you ask your players how they want to begin the campaign, how they want to be introduced, you don't have to worry about player buy-in.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about meeting their expectations. You can simply play out the scenes as each of them are introduced in the way that they feel is satisfying to them and cool to them, and you have a campaign ready to take off.
Yeah, there's a weird meta-textual buy-in that your players already have by sitting down at the table. They are saying, we are going to find a reason for all of our characters to keep hanging out together, right? You actually don't have to do as much as it seems to get them to do that in game.
Yeah.
My first campaign, by comparison, the way it started...
Let's talk about our first campaigns. You go first.
The way my first campaign started was they were on the last, immigrant ship over to the New World, and the ship gets caught in a storm, it wrecks, they are the only survivors, and immediately immediately the ship is beset upon by looters who see a ship washed up on shore, and they're like, awesome, there's gold to be had. So really, I'm like, well, this is why you're all in one place. This is why, you're the sole survivors of this. And also, hey, here's immediately a combat. That's how you're going to get to know each other. That's it, right? And it was really basic. It did everything it needed to do. It wasn't particularly interesting. And it gave them no time to get to know each other as characters.
You have touched upon the absolute best way to bond strangers together that are meeting in a tavern or a ship for the first time. And that is to immediately throw some kind of calamity or tragedy at them.
Yep.
In my very, very first campaign that I ever run, I took my first session very slowly. I said to my players, I'm going to introduce you one by one. I'm gradually going to weave your stories together. And as a narrative, it was beautiful. And as a practical game, it meant that the guy who was number 6 around the table was sitting there for an hour and a half waiting for his turn. Now, when I run games, I will plan some kind of apocalyptic calamity or plot point for the very first episode. And that might be the dragon attacks, or the town is under siege, or all of your souls get stolen. And the aim of the game, of the whole campaign, is to get those back.
Yeah. Yeah, the classic thing, the reason that starting a tavern is classic is because it is a common location that is normal for a lot of people to be in, especially people who are not from around those parts. And the other nice thing about that is because everyone else is from around those parts, it's very easy to, halfway through the conversation with the characters getting to know each other, just as you can feel it start getting awkward, someone bursts through the door and goes, "The Smith's daughter is missing. They've taken Bess."
That's it. You've absolutely nailed it.
And that's why that's a classic, right? Really, all I'm ever trying to do when I'm creating a different circumstance, when I'm creating a different start to my campaign, I'm just trying to recreate that, but in a different context. Because I don't always want to start in a tavern. Maybe I want to start in a shipwreck. Maybe I want to start in a border fort. Maybe I want to start in, I have had them just sort of start classically in a tavern. Why are all these people here? let's get really into the reason that why, there's 5 of the strangest people you've ever seen in an otherwise empty, derelict tavern.
I will say that for these initial events, you absolutely need player buy-in, and I am a huge fan of saying to the players before the first session, I will say a troll is going to attack the town and you want to defend it. That is the one thing you need to have your character built ready to do, because sometimes you will have problem players or maybe players that are new to the game. They don't really understand what they're getting in for. And they're like, oh no, my character would sit in the corner, or my character would run away, or
I'm too timid to do this.
Exactly. And for that character, absolutely, they've got the spirit. They've got the spirit of roleplay. But before that first session...
Can I just interrupt you there?
You may.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before that first session, make sure your players know exactly what is happening and the first quest is going on, and before you know it, they will be bonded in blood. But there are other ways to open a session. There's a writing term called in media res.
Yep.
In the middle
classic.
of some action. Have you ever started a campaign right in the middle of a huge action scene where it's all go from, like, second 1?
No. And I've got 2 really interesting things that I want to mention here. The first, by the way, if you do get the player who goes, I'm too timid, look, that's fine. You can come to the table with somebody who's timid. All right. The first big bit of character development for you is going to be learning boldness.
I love
it's
that.
It's going to be, you've got to tell them that. And you can give them that, and then you can deliver them the mechanisms through which to do that. But you got to set that expectation from the get-go, as you're saying. So to talk about in medias res, and I think even more broadly, there are all kinds of really cool tricks out there that I know all kinds of GMs use, and I think we should maybe spend the next couple of minutes imparting them. I don't use these. I do things a different way. In medias res is a classic one, right? You start in this situation, and I've heard a lot of GMs who will give each player essentially a flashback. So you start in the middle of a fight, and here's this thing happening, and then the player can go, I'm going to use my flashback. You go, okay, the giant winds back. He goes for a great big swing. He draws his club down, and the player goes, okay, flashback. I'm an alchemist. I built a demolition charge that I've laid, behind a pillar, and that goes off now, and it's going to fall over. So now we've got the first little bit of backstory of that. Okay, why were you there beforehand? We can pick that up later. We can go into more detail, but there's that. And you can do really cool things like that. Flashbacks are a great one. I know a lot of GMs who will. One thing they will do is they'll go to their players and they'll go, give me 3 rumors about your character that everyone else has probably heard. 1 common, 1 uncommon, 1 true. And I'm not going to tell everyone. I'm going to give every other player those 3 things. I'm not going to tell them which is which. And then they all sit down at the table. They already know a little bit about one another. It's a little bit of a trick. It's a little bit of a... I don't want to use the word gimmick because that's unfair. There are so many really cool tools like that you can use. And they all weave really nicely, I think, too, in medias res, because you're giving them that... You're doing that legwork of the player background that allows you to start in the middle of the action, that allows you to start well after the farmer has burst in the door of the tavern and gone, they've taken the smith's daughter.
A lot of games will start in that tavern. It is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. And there are lots of other ways you can do it. Shipwrecks, you're imprisoned, you're fighting a giant, you're using your flashbacks, you're using these improv games that we're familiar with here. But D&D or any other RPG is at its heart is an empowerment fantasy. You're leveling up, you're gaining power, you're exploring the world. And a lot of video games and other media will lean into this as well, where your main characters will start as prisoners or powerless or some other fashion. What are some games you've started that haven't been in a tavern besides that Shipwreck? Are there any other examples you've got?
I've got the Borderfort one, for example. I ran a campaign once that had, it seemed like it started with a really basic premise. I use a lot of this, you're all mercenaries who have picked up this particular job. We're halfway through that job. You're guarding a caravan, you're off to kill a beast that's been marauding, the local livestock or something like that. You've all just picked up this job. And I had one, this was a bit of sleight of hand that I did, right? It started like that. And the whole first session was they go out to this place in the dangerous hinterlands. They kill a couple of bears that have been terrorizing, some local livestock. They get back. What this, the setting, the village that they'd gone from was sort of a bit of a border-ish town in, it's sort of a small trading hub in a very dangerous plains land, essentially. As they are arriving back to town, the town is alight. It has been raided whole cloth by orcs, and in the straits just beside, they can see 2 ships limping away from the harbor.
Are you using...
That was the real campaign. The real campaign was you've made it onto this ship just as it was limping out of town.
So you're using this kind of setup to like also set the tone of your campaign of what it's going to be like.
I could have started them on the ship. And the reason I didn't, first of all, I wanted to set this idea that this could go in unexpected journeys. I've talked about the Odyssey in the past. This is like the most Odyssey-esque campaign I've ever run, like in very literal terms.
Can we go
they're on a boat
an
struggling
entire
to get
episode
home.
without you mentioning the Odyssey? Challenge level impossible.
I didn't even do classical studies, would you believe? I opted out. The reason I started prior to that, I wanted to go, look, this is going to take unexpected twists. You're going to get sidetracked down these things, and the whole campaign is going to be unwinding these sidetracks to eventually get back home. Because let me tell you, the payoff when they pulled into Safe Harbor 10 sessions later, incredible, right? The other thing I did is I went, this world is dangerous. You left town for 3 hours and it got raided and razed.
So in that initial setting, you are showing them how dangerous the world is. You are introducing the characters into an already dangerous situation where they have to bond together very, very quickly, which is a fantastic tool for RPGs. And that danger, that tone, that is everything you want from a first session. You are setting those play expectations really, really nicely. One of the best openings for a campaign that I've ever run was having the players wake up in a morgue. They have just been raised from the dead, and they will have so many questions. And that sets the tone, it sets the pace, and it shows that they already have something in common with one another.
Yeah.
And I think we should sum up. I think we've gone through a lot of things. Unless you got one more thing.
Well, what I've got is what we've done, I think, really well over the last 15 minutes is we've talked about how to start a campaign at the start of your character's journeys. We've talked about starting a level 1 campaign or a level 3, a low level. I think we could and definitely should talk at length in another episode about starting those high level campaigns, starting a bit further down the track with people. How do you start an epic level campaign depending on what you're doing? The other thing that I think I want to end us off with, nice to hear what your best start was. What was your worst?
Ooh. I do think my worst start was the one that I've already talked about, where I tried to introduce people very gradually, narratively, one by one, because on a meta level, everybody is here to play a game together, and I don't ever again want to leave people sitting there for an hour and a half listening to other people's stories.
Because they will. In the same way that we could easily talk for another hour about this, your players could easily talk for hours and hours about their character.
Yeah.
Their character is their entire world. It is your job to have them buy into that party experience, the bonding that's going to have to happen with that, how that's going to have to look, and then give them the platform upon which to do that. Maybe that takes a session. Maybe it takes the first 3 sessions. Maybe it takes an entire story arc. But at the end of the day, when you're starting a campaign, that's the goal. That's what you're trying to get to. Everything else is working backwards from that.
Great.
Fantastic stuff. Well, that has been the One Shot Show. Thank you once again for tuning in and listening in on whatever platform this may be. We'll see you in the next one. If you like what you just heard, feel free to support us on Patreon. Every little bit helps. Go to patreon.com/oneshotshow.